Happy Thursday, everybody. It's Maria Rini from the Welcome Home team, and I am so excited to be in one of my favorite hidden gems, the Paterson Museum, and we're here today with Director Jack DeStefano. So Jack's a friend, a fellow Rotarian, and the guy who runs the show here. So thank you for being with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Welcome back to the Paterson Museum.
Thank you. So Jack was also our tour guide with my Rotary Club just 2 weeks ago. So, and we had a wonderful visit. So just a little bit of background. Paterson Museum it runs in its own orbit, right?
Well, actually, the Paterson Museum was established by the first free public library in the state of New Jersey, which would be the Paterson Free Public Library. And the Board of Trustees have the Museum Committee, which was started in 1925, and in essence, we've been continuing in that tradition.
So almost...
We're getting ready for our 100th anniversary in 2025. And actually just started sprucing up all the exhibitions, beginning with the John Holland exhibit. The new text panels just arrived, and by next week we're going to have the new exhibit up, and then we're going to work our way up as we're getting ready for our 100th anniversary celebration.
Super. So, Paterson Museum, going on 100 years old, manufacturing, right? Why Paterson? You've got a partner up the road. That's really the reason for Paterson kind of taking off, or part of the reason.
Well, it's a new beginning, we'll say, with the national park. We've been a national natural landmark since the 60s, and then we had the Great Falls SUM Historic District was declared by President Ford in 76. SUM is the Society for Establishing Useful Manufacturers. They were the first private corporation chartered in the state of New Jersey, and this is where they decided they were going to fix the seat of manufacturing. But they were running with Alexander Hamilton and his idea of, the only way America could truly enjoy the independence we want politically is if we couple it with economic independence. And that meant manufacturing. And so, of course, to get, machines running, we'll keep it as simple as we can, you needed water power at that day. And what they were looking at was the power that could be supplied by the Passaic River.
Okay, so Hamilton's in New York?
He was in New York because he was the Secretary of the Treasury, and that's where his office was based in 1791. So he did a lot of work for the SUM. He entered their early contracts, and he drew up the prospectus for the SUM. And actually, when they first settled on becoming a manufacturing town, and on paper we'll say, they put it out from New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and it was really New Jersey that bought into it. Primarily also William Paterson. He's the one that pushed it through the legislation, and that's why the city bears the name of the second governor of the state of New Jersey.
Okay, so manufacturing starts. What do they start doing?
Well, they begin basically with textiles. We were cotton town. Think of it, up until the 1820s, mid-1820s, really we were Cotton Town, USA. We weren't the Silk City yet. Most people know us as Silk City, of course. But cotton was our biggest production. We had some of the machine shops to build the machinery, and and off it went.
So you built machinery and operated machinery.
Correct.
Now, speaking about building things, in the building that we're standing now, in the museum, what was the museum originally?
Yeah, this was the former assembly shop or erecting shop for the Rogers Locomotive Works. We're sort of, a fourth grader once put it, we sort of use it as our tag name, but we're history within history, because the building is the largest artifact. I'll tell you one thing though, the irony. In 1981, now this is our third home. We began in the assembly room at the Paterson Library at 250 Broadway. You can still see that. And we were an art and natural history museum. The art is still there. Most of it was given by the former Vice President's widow, Jenny Tuttle Hobart. They have the Hobart collection, some magnificent paintings. And then from there we moved to a coach house, which was right adjacent to there. We were there from 1927 to 80. In 81, 82, we relocated here. And the irony is we're in the former assembly shop at Rogers Works. When Jacob Rogers died in 1901, he left all his money to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, establishing their first multi-million-dollar endowment. He gave them, today would be equivalent to about $170 million. It was about $5.5 million. So it really changed the entire operation of that institution. The first year they had, say, off the interest, $200,000, which was ridiculous. They were like the Getty Museum of their day. And it was the director's go-to fund, from what I understand.
So Rogers helps establish the Met, and then the Paterson Museum comes back to Rogers.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, what happened was, once we were declared the historic landmark, some influx of money came in to restore and rehab some of these old structures. We have artists in low-income housing, and some of the former silk mills, and this was chosen to be for, studying the cultural history of Paterson and the industrial development, and its adaptive use in the upper floors. At the moment, there's office space that can be rented out. So we're a mixed-use building.
All right. So some of the history, the manufacturing, Cotton City, Silk City, locomotives.
The three big industries that we focus on in Paterson was the Silk City. At one time, about 1/4 of the population, of the 25,000, 26,000 people of a population of 100,000 were employed in some aspect of the silk. Locomotives, we had about 100 years of locomotive building. Between really our glory year, what you want to say, was between 1850 and 1860, we were the premier locomotive builder in the United States. Up to the Civil War, 75% of all locomotives built were built either in Philadelphia or in Paterson. And the three major works were the Norris Works, Baldwin, and Rogers. We were the big three. And then our biggest problem with Paterson is Paterson's only 8.4 square miles. And what really illustrates well is when you look at the Rogers Works, I mean, it wasn't just this one building, but there were several buildings. There just wasn't any room for further expansion. And primarily it was because the original power source was the river or the raceway system, where they divert the Passaic River and they created channels that would turn water wheels. Of course, then they put it back into the Passaic River. So it's, ecologically, it's an ideal system. And that was really, this was the first practical application of water use for power in the United States. That's what really helped us elevate in 2009 to make that national park status. And so and we do celebrate ourselves as the first planned industrial city in the United States. Planned is the key word.
Speaking of National Park, you are just a 3-minute walk down the street from the falls.
We're a partner site with them. We will be the artifact-rich agency in the historic park. Park's about 50-something acres, about 53 when you include Hinchliffe Stadium, which encompasses all the raceway system. Again, you'll be able to walk to see where the power was, but to really see the artifacts and learn about the history a little bit more in depth, that's where the museum's focus will be.
Super, a beautiful partnership. So it's not only about manufacturing here, you've got some history dating back to the Lenni Lenape Indians.
Yeah, we do about 10,000 years worth. The very first people to see the Great Falls, we're not the first ones, as you know, was the Paleo Indians. Although they were pretty much following the food as the glaciers were receding. Where we focus on our exhibit is the late woodland period, about 3,000, 1,500, 1,500 years ago with the Lenape. We used to refer to them more as like the Lenni Lenape, A lot of scholarship, they're the Lenape people. We dropped the Lenni.
Okay.
But we show their entire way of life, which was really based on fishing along with the Passaic River, which also was their main highways. And when you look at the land of the Lenape Hoken, that they encompass, it's all of New Jersey, part of New York, Connecticut, Little Maryland. It's pretty much where all our streams, the Delaware River is their main, what I would say would be their main highway. Okay. And we focus also on their the hunting and the agriculture that was done right in this immediate area.
Also got local celebrity, Luke.
Local, he's the biggest celebrity. I think, Lou Costello is probably one of the best actors. I can't think of another actor, in the history of television, radio, and movies that would always try to work in his hometown city. He always remembered Paterson, never forgot him.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And you've got an incredible cult exhibit.
One of the most important collections we have would be for Sam Colt's first manufacturing. Everyone thinks of Sam Colt as the guy who invented the revolver. Well, that's really not true. He didn't invent the revolver. A gentleman by the name of Elijah Collier from Massachusetts. What Sam Colt really did for firearms is he brought the factory system to it, or assembly line production. He was based in Paterson between 1837 and 1842. The only problem he really had as a manufacturer of firearms, it was relatively peacetime, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. So, he didn't have anyone to sell these out to make, of course, military contracts. And so he ended up bankrupt here. But the very first products were produced right here. And it was done as the Patent Arms Manufacturing Company. He produced about 5,000 firearms, and they estimate about 10% of that exists today. We have about 35 on display. We have the largest collection on the East Coast.
What?
Of Colt Paterson, as they're designated.
Super, super. So you've got all kinds of stuff all about Paterson's history to interest people.
I think the best thing we have, also, when you talk about for history and teaching, I would think of our most famous school teacher, John Philip Holland, Irish immigrant, who becomes the inventor of the modern submarine. In the back of the museum, as I mentioned, that's our newest exhibit that we've renovated. We have boats 1 and 2 from 1887 and 1881. And the 1881, the larger Athenian ram, is what the Navy considers the first ocean-going submarine. And he would build 4 more, and it's his 6th one that becomes the very first in the United States silent service.
Incredible, incredible. So, in general, who are your visitors here?
Our visitors are, we actually have a real broad spectrum. People, well, before the pandemic at least, people from York come here because they remember, their grandparents and distant relatives moved here to see where the streets were paved with gold, or really paved with their sweat and worked in the textile mills primarily. Of course, we see quite a few students, especially the 4th and 5th grade where you have New Jersey studies involved. Paterson covers just about every spectrum from immigration. We've always been about 33 to 34% foreign born and a haven for immigration. When you first came to the United States, you either ended, when you went through Ellis Island, you either shoot up to Boston, New York, or you came to Paterson because there was work here for you. In addition to that, you just have people who are interested in the history of the national parks, and they try to hit every park, which is, it brings a new influx, and it's brought a lot of New Yorkers to us too.
Yeah, nice and close.
Yeah.
Closest national park. So, other than the fabulous exhibits, the education, the proximity to the falls, you've got all kinds of events going on here.
Yeah, actually, we also started online programming. Now, we're not late to the party, but we're joined it. And also we're working closely. We established a Paterson Museum Foundation. It's also sponsoring some of our talks. And there's a whole series that have begun on, from the Lenape culture. I just recently did one on the history of the museum. We have one starting next week on it's going to be a 2-part series on the Dye Mansion, which is in total, which was George Washington's headquarters in July and October, November of 1780. George Washington was encamped here. And when we have the annual Great Falls Festival, really what it's doing is it's recalling as part of it is recalling the July 1780 breakfast, lunch here between George Washington and his military family, which included Alexander Hamilton.
Interesting. And then you got some in-person events going on too, and a poetry workshop?
Yeah, we've been doing a series of poetry workshops. Again, Paterson's actually a couple of the most famous poets with Allen Ginsberg. And of course, William Carlos Williams wrote that epic poem that started in 1946. It's 5 volumes, which he worked on over 10 years ago, old Doc Williams, entitled, of course, Paterson. And Paterson's kept that tradition going. We have the Poetry Center based at the Community College, and we're working with Paterson's poet laureate, Talena Queen, and she's the one through WordSeed that's helped us put on these workshops. So we're going to use some of the pieces that are done at this, or written at these workshops, to put in an exhibit that March or April rather is National Poetry Month, and we're going to have a brand new exhibit celebrating Paterson's past, future, and present poets. We're kind of curious about the future ones.
Wow.
And so you can find all this on our PatersonMuseum.com.
Okay,
We're real simple.
PatersonMuseum.com. We're at 20 Breakneck Road in Paterson is your GPS. I'm sorry.
2
I got
Market
that
Street.
wrong. Where did I get that from?
I don't know.
2 Market Street is the GPS coordinates. But Paterson Museum.
Paterson.com. That's our
.com,
website.
and all the programs are outlined there, and there's something for everybody. So if you're thinking about visiting, even if you were thinking about visiting the Great Falls, walk down the street, come take a
Yeah,
look
we're
at the
downhill. It's
museum.
real simple. We're a block and a half. And we also do we've done Shakespeare here, and there'll be another series next year. Well, this is the end of the year, isn't it?
Yeah.
So next fall, we're going to do 3 performances again of Shakespeare. So we got some things to keep checking our website out for.
Super.
And I just got to say, it is www.pattersonmuseum. I have to say there's one called www.thepattersonmuseum.com. It looks like us. It's not us. Someone made us a website. Didn't really tell us about it. And so it still gives information from several years ago. So
PatersonMuseum.com.
Yeah, simple.
All right. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.